I bring the warm greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand. President Moise, Secretary Espinosa, and also Governor Brown, a real treat and a pleasure to hear you speak this morning as well. I'd like to begin with a word often used in New Zealand that you may not until now at least have heard. It's the word kaitiakitanga. It's te reo Māori, a word in the language of Indigenous New Zealanders, and in my mind it captures the sentiment of why we are all here today. It means guardianship, but not just guardianship, the responsibility to care for the environment in which we live, and the idea that we have a duty of care that eventually hands to the next generation and the one after. We all hold this responsibility, this duty of care in our own nations, but the challenge of climate change requires us to look beyond the domestic. Our duty of care is as global as the challenge of climate change itself. Now, in the Pacific, we feel that acutely, as do countries like Bangladesh, where land is literally being lost and fresh water is being inundated with salt water due to climate change. Now, there is no doubt climate change is one of the greatest challenges of our generation. Whether there will be enough food and fresh water, whether our towns and cities will be free from inundation from rising seas or extreme rainfalls and devastating storms, whether the biodiversity that lends our planet its richness and resilience will survive, whether the growth and economic development that provided an incredible path to lift people out of poverty will be stunted by widespread systemic impacts of climate change. There is no country, there is no region that does not or will not feel the effects of climate change. Now, for New Zealand's neighbours in the Pacific who are already losing their soil and freshwater resources to salt from the ocean, these are not hypothetical questions, they are immediate questions of survival. Now, although New Zealand accounts for a tiny percentage of global emissions, less than 0.2%, we recognise the importance of doing our part. More importantly, though, we recognise that global challenges require everyone's attention and action, and we all have a responsibility. This is not the time to apportion blame. This is the time to work across borders and to do everything we can together. That's why we're working internationally and want to do more to share research and ideas and build opportunities together with other nations. New Zealand is fully committed to the Paris Agreement. We're taking urgent action to transition to a low-carbon and climate-resilient economy. Now, our focus is on doing that in ways that creates new areas and growth and opportunity for communities. At home, our Minister for Climate Change is this week preparing a zero-carbon bill to legislate an ambitious goal that would be fully aligned with the Paris Agreement's objectives for the world to become carbon neutral in the second half of this century. And we've already put in place some measures to get there. We are reviewing New Zealand's emissions trading scheme to ensure it helps deliver a net zero emissions future. We have, Governor, a target to be 100% renewable by 2035. We have a target of planting 1 billion trees over the next decade. And when you're a population of 4.5 million people, that is a lot of trees. And we are no longer issuing permits for offshore oil and gas exploration. While leadership is important, it's not just up to us in government. 60 CEOs representing half of all New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions have committed to action too. Our largest dairy company and major agricultural producers have declared themselves up for the challenge. Local governments have long-term plans not only to adapt to climate change but to drive emission reductions. Communities, families are taking up the cause. We need them to plant the trees after all. New Zealanders understand that it is both the right thing to do but also the smart thing to do. Now that conversation has shifted dramatically. It was only 10 years ago that I was asked about climate change in a town hall election meeting. And when I spoke passionately about our need to respond to the challenge, I was met by a universal boo that moved across the audience. Now, the debate is no longer whether climate change is a threat, but how much of a threat, how soon, and what needs to be done. We know that the scale of this transformation is huge, and we are personally determined to leave no one behind. It will be, it has to be a just transition, one that works with everyone who will potentially be affected. In New Zealand's home region of the Pacific, we're committed to working to support stronger and more resilient infrastructure, strengthen disaster preparedness, and a low-carbon economic growth through our funding commitments and by bringing good ideas to the table. To support developing countries respond to the impacts of climate change, today, here, I am announcing that New Zealand will spend at least $300 million in climate-related development assistance over the next 4 years, with the majority of this to be spent in the Pacific. This funding allocation will focus on really practical action. For example, providing support for coastal adaptation in Tokelau to reduce the risks of those communities being affected by rising sea level, continuing our effort to strengthen water security across the Pacific, and building on current initiatives such as those in Kiribati, where we're working to provide community rainwater harvesting systems and are investing in desalination. Now, you are all here today because you understand the need for global action to solve what is ultimately a global problem. We understand that too. It's why on the international stage you'll see us pushing for the reform of fossil fuel subsidies, the $460 billion spent each year that works against climate ambition and would be better spent building resilient societies. We're leading research and collaboration on climate change and agriculture, including with some of you here today on the Global Research Alliance. At COP24, we hope to see many of you at the New Zealand-led event on sustainable agriculture and climate change. We're aiming to encourage action to capture what can be the triple win: increasing agricultural productivity, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and strengthening resilience to climate change impacts. And we are undertaking research in Antarctica to better understand the crucial role it plays in global systems. We, with the Marshall Islands, Sweden and France, are also building towards a carbon neutrality coalition. The 16 countries and 32 cities in the coalition are developing long-term strategies for deep cuts in emissions in line with the long-term temperature limit goals we agreed in the Paris Agreement. This week, President Heine of the Marshall Islands and I are hosting the very first high-level meeting of the coalition. We're going to launch the coalition's new plan of action and, I hope, continue to announce new members. And the UNFCCC, we are strong supporters of the Global Climate Action Agenda there, with a very special focus, naturally, as New Zealanders, on agriculture. But underpinning all of this action is the Paris Agreement. And the critical decisions that will be made in Katowice this December, the rules that are agreed must be robust and they must be credible, so that the Paris Agreement is effective and enduring. The world can only reach its Paris goals if we have clarity and if we have confidence about each other's commitments and actions. As I've said back home many a time, I refuse to accept that the challenge of climate change is too hard to solve. So I join you today necessarily hopeful that if we genuinely commit to finding solutions together, no issue is truly unsolvable. And hopeful that we, as 193 member states of the United Nations, can work towards solutions that deliver ultimately for our people and their future. Peace, dignity, a good quality of life, a resilient, sustainable future, and fulfilling ultimately the responsibility that is kaitiaki tanga. Thank you so much for the opportunity.